Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another prediction video. Now, if you guys remember last year, we did an MLS prediction video that didn't go well. Is just the easiest way to put it. I mean, we had obviously COVID kick in. We ended up with the MLS's back tournament. Orlando did incredible. They found their identity as a team. No fans were in the stadium, so you can put an asterisk next to the season if you want to. I'm just going to take the L on the mainly just because of how badly I underestimated Orlando City. And I'm just going to kind of go in alphabetical order. I think it's the easiest way to do this. So we're going to have teams kind of rotating in and out. I might even change some positions of the team, but as you guys see on the screen, top 13 from each conference. It's 13, right? Or is it 14? There we go. We got all 14. But I mean, we're going to start off right from the top, and we're going to start with Atlanta United. Obviously, I'm an Atlanta United fan. I'm going to try to do this as not personal preference forward or bias forward. Atlanta United, I do genuinely think that the team could go far enough and maybe even challenge for the MLS Cup this season. The resorting back to the Argentine South American play style, bringing in the amount of players that we did in the DP and just a lot of money roll in general, I think it's going to be super, super big for Atlanta United. My biggest fear is with how aggressive they play, the better counter-attacking teams, will they take points off of us? How fast are we going to fully adjust and hit the ground running? If you guys watched CONCACAF Champions League, which I had a reaction video up, if you guys want to watch that, pretty good video, if I do say so myself. But we looked okay at best, and I do still think they're going to finish well. I think they're obviously going to get a playoff spot in this top 7, but I think very specifically, we're probably sitting at about 3rd place. That's where I'm going to put them, because I do think that it is going to be maybe a little bit of a slow start. And I do think that, oh, goodness gracious. I do think that there are going to be teams that are going to counterattack very, very well against us. Brad's not going to save everything. Rocco, even if he plays, isn't going to save everything. The team is still adjusting. There's going to be mistakes, especially early on this season, but I do think they'll get better down the stretch towards the end of the season. But by then, I do think enough points will probably be dropped that they're not in that #1 spot challenging for the Supporters Shield. Now, next season, once we're fully ingrained, as long as we keep the manager this time, I do think we'll be in a really, really good spot to challenge for the Supporters Shield and the MLS Cup. But with the CONCACAF Champions League, with the US Open Cup and the league, I don't know how much we're going to be able to balance. So, Atlanta United, I'm not going to spend too much time on. Again, the reaction video just happened. The new boys, wait, they're West. All right, next team we're going with. My starter of the player career mode 2.0. We started off at CF Montreal with Thierry Henry as our manager. In real life, he has now left, maybe to manage a new team, but as of right now, he's just a pundit, but wanted to move back to London, be closer to family, and everything like that. So I do think that's obviously their biggest loss of the season. I do think that their strikers are decent. I do think that Mihailovic is obviously a very, very good signing, and I hope he does grow into that role pretty well, like he did for our player career mode, in all honesty. I do think it's going to be a decent team. I, however, think that Thierry Henry was the difference maker in turning them from a mid-table, lower mid-table MLS team to moving them into that playoff position where they got. I personally am going to put them in 9th place. Just missing out on the playoffs, not by much. I know some people have them a lot lower in the table. I do think that they have the right players to challenge pretty decently. Just reading off my notes over here. I mean, they brought in new signings, which weirdly enough, I have this stat down, from 6 different countries. It's going to be interesting to see how much those players really improve the squad. Mihailovic is going to be the biggest one in my opinion. I mean, they spent nearly $1 million on him to bring him in, but I think Thierry Henry, again, was the difference maker that brought them up to be a title contending team, or a playoff contending team, sorry. So I just don't see Montreal moving much higher than 9th place, and maybe that's even being generous. They could really slip all the way down into this lower mid-table area. I don't think they're going to be in 13th, 14th, but I do. All right, so Chicago Fire is going to be the next team up. This is one of the teams that I do think could actually manage to slip all the way down to the bottom. Also, I apologize if I keep leaning into my little picture right here. They lost CJ Sapong. They still have Baric. They still have they added Espinoza. Another weird fact here, they didn't sign any players over the age of 22. So it's a very, very young squad, gonna have a lot of energy. It'll be interesting to see what play style they have. There are a couple players in the right places that could perform decently well. But in reality, just with the amount of youth in the team, with losing a couple players and not really bringing in standout talent, you have to look at this team as somewhere near the bottom. And I'm personally going to put them in 6th place. I do think they're going to get some good games in. They have a lot of youth. They're going to have a lot of energy. If they can play that counterattacking style, I genuinely think they could pick off points off of some of the top teams that are maybe playing a little too aggressive, leaving the back open to thrive. But that's Chicago Fire. We're going to throw them in 12th place today, and then keep it moving, baby. All right, the big boys, Columbus Crew, by far, in my opinion, the best team in the East. I don't know how many teams are going to beat them. In all honesty, I think that they could win almost the majority of their games this season. They're obviously a very good team. They're the current holders of the MLS Cup. They also went on and signed Kevin Molino and Bradley Wright Phillips, which are going to be 2 solid signings for this season. And then they spent $2 million on a youngster, Alex Matan. I don't know a ton about him. I'm not going to say too much on it just because I don't know who he is that much. But I mean, you genuinely have to look at this team as somebody who's challenging for the Supporter Shield. I do think the Supporter Shield's probably going to come out of the East because I think there's a bigger gap in between the top and the bottom. That being said, the middle is pretty competitive, but whenever I try to think of like New York Red Bulls, if we're looking at New England, Orlando, they're getting better. They're decent teams. They're going to rank pretty high in this, but I just don't know how many points they're going to take off Columbus this year. So it's going to be interesting to see. We're going to throw the Columbus Crew easily at that number 1 slot. Sorry. Because they didn't lose enough that I really think it's going to be a problem. Their biggest loss, in my opinion, Hector Jimenez, but I just don't see it being that big of a problem for them moving forward. They still have very solid players. Obviously, Nagbe, my favorite MLS player, still playing for Columbus Crew, still absolutely dominating. We're going to jump straight into DC United, who, like Chicago Fire, may be at the bottom. So they made some signings, nothing too crazy. Paul Arriola is returning back from loan from Swansea because it was canceled because he got injured pretty quickly after, but I do think he's going to be injured for a decent amount of time for the start of the season. Bill Hamid, I believe, is also still injured, so it'll be interesting to see who starts in goal. And Birnbaum's still currently injured, I believe, as well. I don't know how much they really grew, so it'll be interesting to see how some of these players perform going into another season. Obviously, a lot of ex-Atlanta United players do play there. I know I've heard some people putting DC United all the way at the bottom. I don't have the heart to do that. If I'm putting Montreal at 9, I'm putting DC United right with them there at number 10. I personally just think that DC United will still perform decently well because they do still have some of the players in place in that late season. If they can hit a good stretch, I do think that they could maybe even push for that 8 and 7 spot, maybe even sneaking into the playoffs. But we'll see how it goes. Especially considering the team that we're about to get into has signed Luciano Acosta, who used to play for DC United, moving across to Cincinnati. So let's talk about Cincinnati. They got Luciano Acosta, they added Brenner, who they spent a ton of money on, and they lost Kendall Waston. Defense obviously is going to suffer because of that. Attack is going to grow pretty intensely, in my opinion. They had, some of the biggest moves of the window, plain and simple. But with that being said, losing Kendall Waston, you lose a leader and a defender, and I just don't think they could afford to do both. So even though I do think their attack is going to be better, I'm still going to put them in this spot of 11th place. I don't think it's enough this season for them to improve. Obviously, if they sign some defenders while the window is still open, or some of their defenders play really well, I mean, you could still see FC Cincinnati doing pretty decent this season. Again, with the attackers that they have, they could even beat a team maybe like Atlanta United, where they're going to counter. They're probably going to sit back, try to play more of their midfielders as defenders, and then just lob the ball over the top to Brenner and Luciano Costa. It's entirely possible that they could grab points off of some of these top teams, but I don't think they're going to have that consistency because they're going to be lacking a little bit in leadership and lacking a little bit at that defensive position. Also, they're losing Freddie Amaya. I know he's not a massive player, but somebody that you were looking at youth-wise that was going to come into this team and do really, really well for them, not going to be there. FC Cincinnati, 11th place. Sorry to say it. FC Dallas is... Sorry, I have these in alphabetical order, so I do still have some Western teams in here. Throw them to the West. Let's hop into the next team. All right, Inter Miami. Next team that we're going up with. Biggest loss, Luis Robles retired. They end up losing a keeper in that right. This is a team that added a lot of players, good and bad, really strong, not so strong, big names to the teams. Inter Miami is going to be very, very interesting. The biggest addition, in my opinion, though, is the changing of managers. It's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how Phil Neville does with this team. Obviously leaving the England women's squad to come coach here. He's saying that he's fitting in really well already. He feels like he's at home, and the players are giving him 100%. And I think that's going to be super interesting. Looking at some of the notes, I do think that they could genuinely make that push. I'm personally going to put them right on that edge of the playoffs, either 7 or 8. I'm still deciding in my head. But bringing in Phil Neville, I mean, they brought in some fullbacks. They brought in 2 ex-Sounders fullbacks in Leardom and Jovan Jones to revamp the defense. Kieran Gibbs is going to be joining as well. As an Arsenal fan, little soft spot for Kieran Gibbs. I don't know how much he's going to help. I don't know how much he's going to start. But it'll be interesting to see Kieran Gibbs. They're definitely putting more emphasis on that defense, making sure they have that strong back line. And then, of course, they've added to the midfield and to the front line that was already strong as is. I just don't see Inter Miami missing out on the playoffs of this year. I'm throwing them in. It'll be interesting to see. Phil Neville's going to be the key to this team. If he can get everybody on page, I think they sneak into that number 7 spot, and just as easily could rocket up this table into the top 4 if they hit their stride. This team could go on a pretty crazy streak. So it'll be interesting. The big thing is going to be the keeper. But as long as they have that back line do really well, LGP, as long as he doesn't get too many red cards this season, I do think that they could very, very easily get into that number 7 spot. All right, Nashville SC. A team that I think shocked a lot of people last year. Obviously, we played them in their home opener. I went to that Nashville game. That was right before COVID started kind of picking up, which was pretty crazy. It was a really good time. I don't think they really lost much in their team this year. They did lose David Accam, who seems to just be rotating teams every season for the fun of it anyways. I don't know how big of a loss that's going to be for him. He did perform well last year, but they do still have Walker Zimmerman. They have a pretty solid defense. They're not switching up their coach or anything like that. So it's going to be, in my opinion, one of the more consistent starts to the season, more than likely. I could see this team moving all the way up into 5th place this year, but I am tempted to put them into that 6th place spot next to Miami because I do think that those two teams could be pretty interchangeable. I don't know. They did make one signing that was pretty important. Lali Pinero, or however you want to pronounce that. I'm sure there's a much better way of pronouncing that. But I think this is a very solid team that can perform on a consistent basis as long as they keep buying into what the coach is selling. They're going to have a very consistent start to the season, in my opinion, strong or bad. If they come out the gates and they don't perform, their heads may drop a little bit and drop some serious points. But I do think that this team has what they need to really push forward. Walker Zimmerman being the absolute backbone to that defense. Still waiting for the day that he comes to Atlanta. We'll see. I mean, hometown boy, just come on down whenever you're ready. But I'm going to throw him into... I got to keep him in the playoffs. I have to. There's just no way I don't. There's no way I don't, right? I'm putting him at 6. I'm going to do it. Yep, I'm putting Nashville at 6. I'm putting Nashville at 6, which I'm running out of playoff spots, and I already realize that right now. All right, New England Revolution, a team that I never thought I would say is a guaranteed playoff team, is a guaranteed playoff team. There's no way around it. Boo is one of the best strikers in the league. They added Arner Traustason, I think is how you pronounce it, but I can't really remember. Obviously, they still have Carlos Gil, Buchanan in the team, doing really, really well and looking decent this offseason as well. I just don't see this team performing that bad. I don't think I'm willing to give them the number 2 spot, because I think I'm going to put Philadelphia there looking at the teams left. I'm going to put Toronto out of the playoffs. I really might actually be putting Toronto out of the playoffs. Or I might say Inter Miami's not going to make it. Or I might say Nashville's not going to make it. See, now I'm starting to second guess myself. I don't know if Nashville's doing it back-to-back. I'm taking Nashville out. We're throwing them in 8th place. I know I feel bad about that. I'm putting New England in a playoff spot 100%. I'm putting them in 4. I'm not even going to think about it. We're just going to put them in 4. We're going to put them in 4 underneath Atlanta United. And I know we're looking at this spot, right? This number 2 spot. And the team's coming up. The team is coming up, but not just yet. And you guys know who I'm talking about if you're an Atlanta United fan. But next, we're going to talk about NYCFC again, trying to just stay in this alphabetical order. A team that could very easily make the playoffs and very easily miss out on the playoffs. And with that being said, they didn't really sign anybody that's impressing me. I really just don't think they're that impressive of a squad. I know they still have Maxi Morales. They did lose Alex Ring to Austin, who we'll get into later. They did sign Morales, Alfredo Morales, sorry. So, and he should play there for Alex Ring. It'll be interesting to see how this team builds up. You know what? I'm putting Chicago Fire in last place. I'm going to do it. I'm putting Chicago Fire in last place. Because I kind of forgot about NYCFC. And I'm not willing to say that they're going to be bottom at the table. I do think that they're a verge of playoff team here with Nashville. So I'm going to put them at number 9. NYCFC, number 9. I do think that they have some decent players. They have a formula that works. They have the home field advantage, in my opinion, as well, playing on that smaller field. Just don't know if I can put them in the playoffs, though. It's going to be some growing pains with the team. I don't think it's a perfect replacement for Alex Ring, who does bring a little bit of leadership in that midfield. So I'm not ready to put him there. New York Red Bulls is the next team. And honestly, they still have Aaron Long. They lose Tim Parker. They bring in Fabio. Could sneak into the playoffs. They could. They really, really could. And I think it's going to be NYCFC or Red Bulls. I don't think it's both this year. I just don't. They are going to be signing Frankie Amaya. I think I called him Freddie earlier. Apologies. They made some of offensive signings, but they do lose Tim Parker. And although Aaron Long is great, I think that partnership between Aaron Long and Tim Parker is what makes it so strong. And I don't know if they're going to perform as well. Aaron Long is still an absolute beast. He's going to do great. But the backline as a whole is losing something in Tim Parker. I do have a soft spot for Tim Parker, though. I've always liked him. So maybe that's why I'm saying this. But I'm putting him in 10th place. They could absolutely surprise me. New York Red Bulls is not a team to ever really truthfully look past. They're pretty much a staple in the playoffs, and a staple for the top half easily every time. But I'm not putting them in there. Now we're getting into the big one. Orlando City, one of the best teams in the East, and it hurts me to say that. And they signed Pato. Alexander Pato. I don't know how well he's going to do. I don't know if he's the best replacement for DK. I do think they're going to get money for DK and could even bring in another striker if Pato doesn't work out. This is a team that is immediately, definitely 100% this season making the playoffs. I don't think I'm willing to put them in that number 2 spot, though. I don't think I'm ready to admit it and put them above Atlanta United, but they could very easily do it. They have an identity of their team. They have a play style. It works really well. I actually think genuinely Orlando will probably win the home opener against Atlanta United because they're just more soundly created than Atlanta United. But it'll be interesting to see because both teams are struggling to score right now. So it'll be interesting to see how much Pato affects the team, how much they're able to score. I'm putting him in the number 5 spot. No more talk about Orlando. Get him out of here. Number 5, they're making the playoffs and could easily push for the semifinals or finals of the MLS Cup, in my opinion. But I'm not ready to say that they're going to move into that spot. My number 2 team, I'm just going to go ahead and put them in here. Philadelphia Union. Philadelphia Union. That's how you spell Philadelphia. Let's go, baby. The Union is a very solid team, in my opinion. They do lose Aronson. And they do lose McKenzie, which are 2 very, very solid players. Honestly, probably some of their best players. They do still have Andre Blake. They do add Finley to the squad. They're a very solid team. You know what? I kind of want to put them in 6, but I'm not putting Toronto. Wait, am I missing a spot? Oh, wait, no. I don't know if I'm willing to put Toronto at 2, but they are looking really good in the CONCACAF Champions League. You guys read that right. I switched it. I'm putting Atlanta United at 2. I don't know if I'm willing to say Philadelphia Union's going to be number 2 with losing McKenzie and Aronson. Those are 2 solid players from last year that gave them so much stability in the team. I'm putting Atlanta United at 2. Number 6, easy, Toronto. Just throw them in. I don't even want to talk about Toronto, really, but we will. We will. Let me pull up my notes. Give me one sec. All right, let's talk Toronto. Toronto, they still have Pozuelo, absolute beast. They lose Piatti, and they don't sign anybody. They don't sign anybody. But if Josie stays healthy, if they perform like they did in the CONCACAF Champions League against Leon, I don't see them not making the playoffs. You just can't not choose Toronto to make the playoffs. You just can't. This might be the season that they don't do it, and if they don't do it, it will probably be one of those 8 through 10 teams that will slide up into that spot. Obviously, Inter Miami there as well. That could falter out, but you have to put them on that borderline because they didn't make signings. They didn't strengthen their team. So Toronto is questionable. Also, they got Red Bull's old coach, right? The one that I hate? That might be a problem for him, but I don't know. I'm still sticking with it. Toronto, 6th place. Just throw them in there. That's the East. I know this video is going to be long. I'm going to try to cut it down and not be too annoying about this. But that's the East. Columbus Crew, Atlanta United, Philadelphia Union, New England Revolution, Orlando City, Toronto, Inter Miami, Nashville, NYCFC, New York Red Bulls, Montreal, DC United, FC Cincinnati, and Chicago Fire. Let's hop into the West, baby. All right, first and foremost, the new debut squad, the Matthew McConaughey-owned team out of Texas, Austin FC. Are they good enough to join the few of expansion teams that have made the playoffs? I don't think so. They got Alex Ring, gonna be a great player for them. Great foundation player that they got. Cecilio Dominguez joins the squad. They do spend some money. They bring in some South American players. They're looking good for their squad. They're spending money on that DP spot. Their defense is looking shaky, though. Their defense is looking shaky. I don't know if they have a true, genuine number 1 starting goalkeeper, so that'll be interesting to watch. But they do have a decent midfield. And if their strikers perform, I don't know too much about their strikers, but if they perform, could bring them into a playoff spot. But I'm not willing to say it. I'm putting them in 10th place. I think it's a solid foundation spot for them. I think they're going to have an incredible fan base. They're going to build a good team. But I'm not willing to move them any higher than that in their debut season. There's always one, shocker team, and I think Austin could be that team, but I'm just not ready to put them in a playoff spot right off the rip. All right, Colorado Rapids, my boy Kellen Acosta's team. They bring in Barrios. They still have Nomley, who's incredible. They do lose Nicky Jackson. Let me see. Let me make sure I didn't miss any notes here. They do have a lot of youth talent. You can't deny that. It's a very, very interesting squad. Vines, Bassett, Lewis, all of them could perform really well for them. Bring them into a playoff spot, honestly. We're actually looking at a Colorado squad that is on the verge of making a playoff spot, which is why I'm actually keeping Austin in 10th place. But I don't know if it's enough to cross that line. I'm going to put them in 8th place. In my opinion, the West is a little bit harder to judge off of than the East is. So it's going to be a little bit harder for me to really differentiate these teams, but I'm going to put the Colorado Rapids at 8. Let's keep it moving. All right, big boy FC Dallas, the other team. Well, one of the other teams in Texas. They do lose Barrios, who I think is a very, very good player. We just talked about him. They do bring in O'Brien, and Matt Hedges is still there. And Matt Hedges is a beast. Love Matt Hedges. I think they're a solid team. I think they're definitely a playoff team. I don't see how you could see it any other way. Obviously, they lose Reggie Cannon. They lose Brian Reynolds. But they bring in a lot of money with that. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting. They bring in a center back. They bring in a winger that I do think that could perform. I don't know if he's going to fit into the squad as fast as Barrios did the job for Dallas. But I do see Dallas moving up into a playoff spot. I don't know how high they're going to go. Again, it's the West, man. It's so tight in the West that this team could move anywhere in this bottom half of the playoff position area. I'm going to personally put them at 6. I think it's just a safe place to put FC Dallas. They could perform, go to the moon, but if some of their new signings don't work out, I think they fall into that 6th place spot, but they're still a very solid team. I do still think that they're a playoff team 110%. The last team, right? The last team in Texas, Houston Dynamo. Darwin Quintero, I still don't know how that deal happened, but Darwin Quintero joining in the squad last season. Bringing in Tim Parker this season, you get the defensive strength, you get the attackers, you have Manotas, you have so many great players. They have your Rudy, Picault, Derek Jones, Joe Corona. I mean, they're just such a solid squad. With that, I don't know, man. The biggest thing for me, and I had to pause and think about this, the biggest thing for me is, will all of these players mesh well? Because they brought in a lot of players. Because I'm re-looking at this list, and there's so many solid players in this team that you're really looking at quite a big range. It'd be a shame to not see this team in the playoffs, because I'd like to see them in a playoff situation versus a league season. I don't know how great they're going to do at the beginning of the season. It might be enough to keep them out of the playoffs. I'm going to put them in 9th. But of course, as we did in the East, teams could rotate all around. A lot of really good signings, though. You can't look past them, but I'm putting them in 9th for now, not making the playoffs. All right, the 2 LA teams. We're going to kick things off with LA Galaxy. You still have Letgat in the squad. They lose Christian Pavon, which is an absolutely massive player. They do bring in Cabral. Let me make sure I get this right. He is the winger, so he should inevitably be the easy replacement for Christian Pavon, but I don't think there is an easy replacement for Christian Pavon. I don't know how much he's going to be able to replace him. You have to see a big season out of Chicharito if they're going to do well. And they also bring in Villafania, who I like, I am a Portland fan, but I don't know. I like Villafania. I don't know how much he adds to the LA Galaxy squad. And this is an LA Galaxy squad that I genuinely could see miss out on the playoffs kind of badly, in all honesty. To the point that I'm actually going to do this, and I'm putting LA Galaxy at 10th place. This is probably the biggest shocking pick that I'm going to do, is putting LA Galaxy in 10th place, missing out on the playoffs. So they're going to have to really look at themselves in the mirror and decide, do they really want to continue forward down this road? Or is it time to get Chicharito to retire, open up some cap space, bring in another big name? But if Chicharito lights the league on fire like he's absolutely capable of doing, getting those easy goals, being a nuisance in the box, they could easily be a playoff team, right? I still don't see him winning the league, but it could be a playoff team. Big boy LAFC. Top 4 team. Top 3 team. I would even go to say. I would say top 3 team. I'm going to stick with that. They still have Diego Rossi. They bring in Corey Baird, but they do lose Bradley Wright Phillips. And I think Bradley Wright Phillips is actually pretty important to this squad. Pretty important to the squad. They also lose Brian Rodriguez, which is actually a massive thing that's probably going to keep them from getting first or second in this division, in my opinion. I'm going to put them in 3 because of those losses. I don't know how many signings they really made to truly replace that. Baird's going to be incredible from Real Salt Lake. He joins a very stacked team. The striker position is obviously going to be interesting to watch over this season. Diego Rossi is going to be a beast as always. Baird's going to do really well on this team as well. And they do have the pieces just built into this squad to still perform well in the West. Will they make it all the way up? Obviously, they still have Vela as well. So I'm not sure. With Baird joining the team, it'll be interesting. Carlos Vela has to stay. Carlos Vela has to stay in shape, in form, and not injured the entire season, or this all falls apart. But I'm still keeping him in third place, not challenging for the Supporters Shield, but easily making the playoffs because they are one of the best. There's just no way to look away from that. Minnesota United, Atlanta United's sister MLS expansion team type deal, whatever you want to call it. They lose Kevin Molino, which is probably a pretty big deal if we're being entirely honest with you. But they are a very, very solid team. They brought in some very, very high quality players to bolster the team. A lot of South American talent joins the team. They bring in Agudelo, they bring in Raitala, and they bring in Will Trapp. 3 incredible signings. They do lose Molino, but I do think that they are a team that could absolutely perform. I've seen some lists that are putting Minnesota all the way up near 2. I don't know if I'm ready to do all that. I am going to put Minnesota at 5 though, at least for the time being. Minnesota United, solid team. Again, very, very good additions to their midfield. Their attack is going to perform well. Their defense is very strong. I think also strengthening there as well. So Minnesota United, easy playoff position, in my opinion. Let's hop to the next team. My baby boys, Portland Timbers, are up next. They bring in Claudio Bravo. They bring in they have Sebastian Blanco. They don't bring him in. They have very, very solid players. They lose out on Villafania. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at that left back position. Claudio Bravo obviously fitting into that position there. And then they're looking at Rankin, who's going to be at the right back position. And honestly, you have to look at it like they're both going to be I think they actually upgraded. Villafania, very solid player, don't get me wrong. But I do think that Bravo is an absolute beast of a man if you really look at it. They also keep Felipe Mora. And obviously Diego Valeri is still there. He's hungry as hell. The only thing that's going to keep them back is if they have a slow start because they're focusing so much on the CONCACAF Champions League. I know Diego Valeri has already said in an interview that is his absolute priority this season. He would love to win it. They absolutely dominated in the second leg. And I think this is the team that could challenge for those top 2 positions. And usually I would say Portland might not be challenging for the Supporter Shield because they're very streaky. This season, I think they're very, very, very solid. Obviously, I am a Portland fan, and I do genuinely think that they are that #1 team in the West. I'm going to do it. We're putting the Portland Timbers #1, baby. Let's run it. All right. The boys. Real Salt Lake. Bobby Wood, my boy, who I've always hoped that was going to do big things in Germany, but he never really lived up to it. They still have Rusnak. They lose Corey Baird that we already talked about earlier. Did they really make the signings they needed to really compete? I don't know. They bring in Anderson Julio, who didn't really perform that great. They lose Beckerman, who retires. They lose Baird, and they lose Onua, I believe is how you pronounce it, but I can never remember. But they also bring in Rubio Rubin, who is a decent player that could perform well for him. And again, we don't know what Bobby Wood's going to do in the MLS. He might light it on fire because it's not the Bundesliga. But I mean, he was in Bundesliga too, and not really lighting that league on fire either. So I don't know. I'm not willing to say that Real Salt Lake's making the playoffs. Am I willing to put him in last though? Because I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm putting Real Salt Lake in last place. I'm just going to do it. I think they lost too many pieces. They are absolutely in a rebuild period. I'm throwing Real Salt Lake to the bottom. All right. We're looking at San Jose now, and I'm going to get this list right. They lose Lima, Vaco, Kashia, Hosen, and Erickson. They bring in Abasias, Abacasis, whatever, right back position. They bring in Eric Rometti from Atlanta United, solid midfielder, Is it game changing for their position? Or their position in the league? I'm not sure. They also bring in Chofis to replace Vaco, but Vaco, I don't know. I don't think he's good enough to really replace him. But it's going to be very interesting. This team could absolutely storm. I'm going to put him in 12th, which I know is going to shock a couple people because they are beast. I believe Wondolowski is coming back again because he can't retire. But I don't see him making the playoffs. I just don't. They could switch with a lot of those teams that are in this 8 to 12 range, but just for the sake of Salt Lake, San Jose, just for the sake of some of these other teams that are in the West, again, this division or this conference is so close, it's hard to really choose anything, but I just don't see San Jose doing well. I think they're in a rebuild period just like Real Salt Lake, and they just didn't make enough signings this season to make that jump happen and that rebuild happen in one season. So we're throwing them there, and we're moving straight into Seattle Sounders. The Sounders, they're losing a lot of players. Again, we already talked about it. Jovan Jones, Kelvin Leardom, both not available. Jordan Morris injured, could be coming back. I'm not sure. Is he still technically on loan, or did he already come back as well? Jordan Morris, I think, is technically back, but he is injured, so it'll be interesting to see where he comes back in the season and how well he does. Svensson also gone. They do bring in Freddie Montero, who, from what I've heard, has been doing well with the preseason, and they do still have Rudy Az. It's going to be a very good season for Seattle, but can they perform while not having Jordan Morris in the team? Can they replace those pieces in their defense to still keep that stout defense that Seattle Sounders have? I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not sure how high I'm willing to rank this squad in this league, but I think I'm kind of willing to put them at 4th. Maybe. I'm putting them at 4th for now. And then we go straight into Sporting KC, a team that I think I might want to put at number 2. And I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to put Sporting KC at number 2. Sporting KC, Polito, doing great in the league. He's going to be a beast. I think they made playoffs. They got number 1 in the West. They bring in Remy Walter to replace Gutierrez. But it's going to be interesting to see. Matt Bessler also leaves. I mean, they lose Fernandez. They bring in Remy Walter. But I think it's going to be a very, very strong team. I do think that they perform well in the league. They have a little bit of depth to their squad. They're solid and really just have to hit that hot streak that I think they're capable of doing. And I think I'm willing to put Sporting KC at number 2. This Sporting KC and LAFC will probably flip at some point throughout the season multiple times, along with Portland Timbers. But I think Sporting KC by the end of the season will be in that number 2 spot. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. I messed up. I literally forgot Vancouver Whitecaps even existed. I was looking at this and I'm like, what team is left? I had to like genuinely think about it. And for this reason, I'm moving all 3 of these teams up. Wait. We're moving all 3 teams up. Colorado Rapids making the playoffs. Houston Dynamo barely missing. LA Galaxy number 9. And we're putting Vancouver Whitecaps in this last spot. We can go ahead and type it in just for that purpose. Biggest reason why they lose Freddie Montero. They don't have a number 10. They bring in some players that could end up doing well. They bring in Gaspar, who can play right back. But we've seen it time and time again with the MLS, especially the MLS. In most leagues, but especially in the MLS. The number 10 center attacking mid role is one of the most important things in this league. You don't have the best defenders in the world. You don't have the best midfielders in the world. There ends up being a lot of these opportunities where a creative player is make or break for your squad. It can be for a lot of these teams. Vancouver hasn't brought anybody in yet that I genuinely think could take over that role. Obviously, they have some players that maybe step into that role, do absolutely incredible with the players that are standing around them. But I don't think it's enough to make the playoffs. I'm absolutely not going to put them at that number 7 spot. And I don't think I'm willing to put them at 8 or 9 ahead of LA Galaxy either. So I'm going to put them at 10. We're keeping Austin FC at 11. And if we go straight down the list, Portland Timbers are going to win the West. Well, you know, table wise. I still don't think they're going to get a supporter shield. I think that's going to come from the East, but we'll see. Sporting KC, LAFC, Seattle Sounders, Minnesota United, FC Dallas, Colorado Rapids, all making the playoffs. Houston Dynamo, LA Galaxy, Vancouver missing out on the playoffs. Austin, San Jose, and Real Salt Lake ending out the bottom of the table. Those are my predictions. We'll see how that ends at the end of the season, but that's genuinely where I think this is going to go. Let me know what just outlandish thing did I just say. What do you just absolutely disagree with me on? What should I have changed in this? And then we'll revisit this come the end of the season or come playoffs. See how we did, and then do our playoff predictions as well. But if you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next one, I'll see you guys later. Peace. Is it my fault?